Hi everyone, it's Scott from Math Logos. In this lesson, we're going to look at converting fractions to percentages. Let's start off by defining the word percentage. So the word percentage literally means out of 100. Think of the word per as meaning out of, and cent is 100. Think of a century, that's 100 years. A centurion was an officer in charge of 100 soldiers, and so on. How does that definition actually help us? Well, if we think of the percentage 44%, that literally means 44 out of 100. And so we can convert from a percentage to a fraction really easily. Now, this lesson is not about going from a percentage to a fraction, but rather from a fraction to a percentage. And so what that means is if we have a fraction where we have a denominator that's 100, the percentage is simply the numerator. And that's what we've got here in our first example. So 55 over 100 is equal to 55%. But we won't always be given a fraction that has a denominator of 100. So for example, here we have a half, and what we can do is we can turn that into a fraction out of 100. So I'll multiply by 50 on the denominator and 50 on the numerator. 1 multiplied by 50 is 50, 2 multiplied by 50 is 100, and that gives me an equivalent fraction where the denominator is 100, and so I can write down that as 50%. So when we have a fraction and the denominator is 100, the numerator is my percentage. Of course, the other way to do this question is to think about a half as being equal to 0.5, and then we can convert from a decimal to a percentage by multiplying by 100, and that would get you to 50% as well. Now, one last example, so 3/25, I want to turn it into a fraction out of 100. I'll think, how do I go from 25 to 100? Well, I need to multiply by 4, and of course, I need to do that on the denominator and on the numerator like this. And that would be equal to 3 multiplied by 4, which is 12, and 24 multiplied by 4 is 100. So 12 hundredths is 12%. Pause the video and give these 3 questions a go. All right, let's have a look at them. So 9.1 over 100, we've got that denominator of 100 that we're looking for. So the numerator is my percentage, that's 9.1%. 3/5 is equal to 0.6. As a decimal, I can multiply that by 100 to get me to 60%. The other way to do it is to take 3/5, multiply it by 20 over 20, because 5 multiplied by 20 is going to give me 100. 3 multiplied by 20, 60. I've got that denominator of 100, so my answer is 60%. And the last one, 7/10, multiplied by 10 over 10. That gives you 70 out of 100. So it's 70%. Okay, so we have a few more examples. Let's have a look. So I've got 9 out of 20. I want to multiply 20 by whatever I need to do to get to 100. Well, that's 5. I'll do that on both the top and bottom. 9 multiplied by 5 is 45, and 20 multiplied by 5 is 100. So this is equal to 45%. In the next example, it's a little bit harder to get to that denominator of 100 because I can't multiply 40 by a whole number to get to 100. But what I've spotted is that I can actually simplify this fraction by divide by 2 on the numerator and denominator. And that gives me an equivalent fraction of 3 over 20. And I can then turn that into a fraction out of 100 by multiplying by 5 over 5. 3 multiplied by 5 gives me my 15. And 20 multiplied by 5 gives me 100. So that is equal to 15%. So in the next example, I've got a fraction that's greater than 1. The reason for that is that the numerator is greater than the denominator. And what that means is my overall answer is going to be greater than 100%. I need to know that that is possible. And of course, I need to expect it when I've got a fraction like this one. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 4 on the numerator and denominator to turn it into a fraction out of 100. 25 multiplied by 4 gives me my 100. And 30 multiplied by 4 gives me 120. Because I've got that denominator of 100, I can simply write down the numerator as my percentage. It's equal to 120%. Pause the video, give these 3 a go, and then I'll pop your answers up on screen in a second. Okay, so you should have had answers of 62%, 30%, and 150%. So let's have a look at some harder examples. Here we have 7 over 200. Now, what I've been trying to do so far in the lesson is to get the denominator to a value of 100. And I can do that by dividing by 2. 200 divided by 2 is 100. And we might be tempted to hesitate because 7 divided by 2 is not a whole number. But let's go ahead and do it and see, well, happens. So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. And 200 divided by 2 is 100. Now we're probably not used to having a decimal on the numerator of our fraction, but in this case it's okay because we understand that when we have that denominator of 100, our numerator is our percentage. So this is 3.5%. So actually in this case, having the decimal in the numerator is quite helpful for us to get the percentage quite quickly. The next example is 1/3. Now, I don't want to scale this up to a denominator of 100 because they cannot multiply 3 by any whole number to get to 100. I need a different way of doing it. And this is one of those examples where it's going to be helpful to convert 1/3 into a decimal. Now, 1/3 is one of the fractions. We need to know the decimal equivalent. It's 0.3 recurring. If you didn't know that, simply set up your short division and do 1 divided by 3, and that would give you your decimal. From this point, as a decimal, I can then multiply it by 100 to turn it into a percentage. That's how I go from a decimal to a percentage. And what I have to be careful to remember here is that the 3 will recur indefinitely like this. So I get 33.333%, and I'll write that a little bit neater. I'll say that's equal to 33.3 recurring percent. The last one's 6/16. So again, there's no whole number that I can multiply 16 by to get to 100. And so I'm going to have to do something slightly different. I'll start off by trying to simplify this fraction, which I can do. I can divide through by 2 on the numerator and on the denominator, and that gives me this fraction 3/8. And the eighths are fractions that we need to be comfortable with. So 1/8 is 0.125. 2/8 is 0.25. because it's equivalent to 1/4, and therefore 3/8 is equal to 0.325. So I'll say that 3/8 is equal to 0.325. Then I'll convert it from a decimal to a percentage by multiplying by 100. So that's what I've done there. And that gives me that answer of 32.5%. Pause the video and give these questions a go. All right, so your first one, 13 over 400, you should have divided by 4 on the numerator and denominator to get your denominator of 100. 13 divided by 4, I'll do that off to the side using my short division. Put down some zeros. 4 goes into 13 3 times to give me 12 with 1 left over. 4 goes into 10 twice to give me 8 with 2 left over. And 4 goes into 25 times. So 13 divided by 4 is 3.25. This gives me this strange fraction, we're probably not used to it, 3.25 over 100. Because I've got that denominator of 100, my answer is 3.25%. 4/9 is one of those fractions, it's helpful to know. It's 0.4 recurring. We have this pattern with the ninths. 1/9 is 0.1 recurring. 2/9 is 0.2 recurring, and so on. So 4/9 is 0.4 recurring. Multiply that by 100 to turn it into a percentage. That's 44.4 recurring percent. Last one, 15 over 24. Let's start by simplifying this fraction. We'll divide through by 3 on the numerator and denominator because that's my highest common factor. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 5/8. Well, 4/8 is 0.5. And I know 1/8 is 0.125. If I add 4/8 and 1/8 together, I get my 5/8, and that's equal to 0.625. So as a decimal, this is 0.625. Multiply it by 100 to turn it into 62.5%.